And I am picking the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams to win the NFC and to be a rookie quarterback representative in the Super Bowl.
Chicago gets Caleb Williams. I think Ryan Poles has done a really good job. I think Ryan Poles is the GM for the future. Caleb's the quarterback for the future. That was an easy one. It's about time to realize what you are. Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, I don't think it works. The coach is a timing coach who loves structure. And Caleb likes to ad-lib. And this general manager, by the way, is 3-17 since he took over the job and is yet to draft a Pro Bowler.
I am pumping the brakes. I think he is further behind than he should be his first start of year 2.
Caleb Williams was supposed to be the shortcut, a once-in-a-generation talent, a creator in chaos, the kind of quarterback who turns a bruised franchise into a destination. Draft night felt like a coronation, not a beginning. The comps flew. Kyler Murray's electricity, Russell Wilson's deep ball ability, the improbability of a young Mahomes when he rolls left, and Ben physics back to him, and Chicago embraced the fairy tale right away. If you were a Bears fan, you didn't buy a new era, you pre-ordered it, and then the game started to count. A full rookie season, a carousel of coaches and criticism, a mountain of sacks, and now 2 games in a year 2, the noise has settled into something quieter and more revealing. It's not the arm that's on trial. It's not the legs. It's the eyes. Where they go before and after the snap. How fast the brain resolves the picture, and those split-second answers when the defense sends heat. Here's the part that turned into a league-wide magnet. Caleb admitted he needed to, quote, work on my blitz looks. Now, you can say that to yourself in the facility. You can write it on the whiteboard and circle it in red and live in that room all spring. But you can't give it to 32 defensive coordinators with a microphone and expect any kind of mercy. The minute that sentence lived outside Hallis Hall, the schedule became a scavenger hunt. Double-A mug looks, nickel cats, simulated pressures that steals your first throw and dares you to skip to 2. Every week, a new wrinkle on the same test. Can you see it early? Can you change the picture for your line? Can you replace the blitzer with the ball? When Caleb didn't, he made Sundays harder than they had to be. When he did, you could feel the offense take a breath. And that's why the question 2 games into the season isn't whether he's talented. It's whether his answers are arriving on time. His rookie year was a paradox. The raw numbers suggest composure. Over 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, and a stretch of 354 consecutive passes without a pick. An NFL rookie record that lasted across 9 games. At the same time, he was sacked 68 times, a Bears single-season mark, and the 3rd highest total for any quarterback in NFL history. Both halves of that sentence are true, and they live together. A young player who protected the ball better than most rookies ever have, and a young player who absorbed too much punishment because the ball didn't always come out when the blitz told him to. Yes, he started all 17 games, and he finished all 17 games, which says something about his strength and durability. But it's something that's not sustainable if he keeps taking this type of punishment. Ask Andrew Luck, who retired early due to too much punishment. And as recently as this past Sunday, you can ask Joe Burrow. The story of last season was a microscope. On some snaps, you saw the future with crystal clarity. On others, you saw exactly how far away it can feel. Those records and that sack count sit side by side in the same frame and force you to calculate the whole picture. If you've ever sat in a quarterback room in August, you've heard the mantra 1,000 times. Identify the threat, make the right protections, replace the blitzer with the ball. It's not poetry, it's plumbing. You don't always need to throw a 20-yard dig against post-snap rotation. Sometimes the right answer is the boring one. Sight adjust, flare to the back, stick to hot, live to fight on 2nd and 4. The problem for a creator, especially one who has lived a football life where creativity pays, is the boring throw can feel like a defeat. Caleb's instinct is to hunt a better play, to spin from a clean pocket to extend the play into a scramble drill where his natural gifts can win the day. And when it works, you mark the time and save the clip for a montage. But when it doesn't, the drive dies and the pass rushers mark your launch point like a pin on a map. Caleb's rookie tape had both kinds of moments, and defensive coordinators collected the data like souvenirs. You could see simulated pressure steal his opening answers and watch him wait a half beat for door number 2. Often, it was. Now we're here. The second act. The Ben Johnson act. The one built to sand down edges and put easy answers back on the front page of the call sheet. If you followed the Detroit Lions the last couple of seasons, you saw an offense that motioned you to death. A lot of shifts, and then punished the leverage you just gave away. Under Johnson, structure wasn't a restriction. It was a springboard. The bet explicitly is that Caleb doesn't need a bigger sandbox. He needs brighter cones. The installs taught pre-snap questions that dictate post-snap speed. The staff leaned on staircase, footwork, letting the body tell the truth at the same time, so his eyes don't wander before his feet are ready. The roster help was practical, not romantic. You give him a veteran line presence, a tight end who can be part outlet and part matchup, and keep DJ Moore and Rome Odunze in feature roles, so defenses can't call your bluff on the outside. That's the architecture. And the field test arrived right on time in week 1 of the 2025 season. Soldier Field was loud. The broadcast all but begging for a neat narrative. The apprentice turned head coach. The supposed savior running out to write the introduction with his legs and his arm. And the script for a quarter and a half was almost too clean. Caleb opened with 10 straight completions. The ball shooting out on rhythm. A first drive touchdown to set the tone. He ran for a score in the first, threaded one in the third, and the Bears led most of the night. And then they stalled. But Chicago's offense didn't stall simply because the quarterback panicked after all the scripted plays had been used. Chicago stalled because games have ties and the Vikings flooded the fourth quarter with answers. J.J. McCarthy came alive, stacking 2 passing touchdowns and another one on the ground. Caleb's line told a balanced story. 21 of 35 for 210 yards and a touchdown with no picks, 6 carries for 58 yards and a rushing touchdown, only 2 sacks. And the tape told an even more detailed one. The early plan gave him clear answers. The late plan asked him to keep pace as Minnesota changed the questions. And I know a lot of fans want to put the game on Caleb, but for me, it was more promise than panic. A night where the processing looked more punctual, until pretty much the final act turned purple. The scoreboard wrote the summary. Vikings 27, Bears 24. The box score inked the details you can read out loud without wincing. The film had the nuance the box can't hold. Then, this past Sunday happened. The Detroit Lions. Ben Johnson's return as a visitor. Ford Field's sound system turned to spike, and a Lions team that made a point with every snap. Detroit didn't just beat Chicago. They boat raced them and didn't check the mirror. The final was 52-21. 7 Lions touchdowns, 5 of them on Jared Goff's arm. A near perfect day for the home quarterback and a rough afternoon for Chicago's defense. Inside all that noise, Caleb put together a cleaner passing line. 19 of 30 for 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And still took 4 sacks. So if you wanted to argue progress, you could point to the efficiency and the red zone finishes. If you wanted to argue the opposite, you could circle the sacks, the off-script play that turned into an interception, and the way the game got away in the second half. Both arguments fit the facts. Detroit dictated the terms, and Chicago couldn't get off the field or keep up on it. That was the reality of the afternoon. And it doesn't require a hot take to say it out loud. It only requires a box score and a deep breath. And here's where the present tense matters. The national conversation will always wobble between extremes. One outlet will treat a couple of crisp drives like a referendum on the future. Another will try to turn a young quarterback's confidence into a marble for a statue of irony. It's the league. It talks. You either learn to block out the noise or you're drowned in it. The only way to make this signal louder is to change the tape. And changing the tape isn't magic. It takes time. It's boring. It's ordinary. It's the exact stuff a casual watcher can't see and a veteran defender can smell from 10 yards away. Is the time to throw against pressure coming down every week? Are your backs and tight ends suddenly touching the ball without glamour because they're hot and the quarterback is allergic to the sack? Is the sack to pressure rate dropping even if the total pressures aren't because the ball is making the defense wrong before the rush can be right? If those three dials move in the right direction, the rest of the offense doesn't need a personality shift. It needs a calendar. 2nd and 6 beats 2nd and 16. Red zone trips are worth more than deep shots that drift into the stands. Another punt headline dies in your feed because your punter was bored. That's how quarterbacks grow. Not with a single throw that trends, but with 100 non-flashy decisions that keep the offense on a 2-lane road instead of an off-road ramp. What's encouraging if you're trying to find adult hope in a league that sells fireworks is that year one already proves something behavioral, not just physical. Protecting the ball as a rookie at that volume is not an accident. You don't luck your way into 354 interception-free passes. You don't do it with chaos as your core identity unless some part of you can hear the clock in your head even when the room is loud. So the question isn't, can Caleb play on time? We've seen him string a half of punctual throws, a quarter of trust the window anticipation, a drive that looks like a teaching tape from where his eyes and feet should meet. The question more is whether he can do it when the defense is lying in wait, the crowd is shaking their camera, and a second-level player takes away your first read. And that's where Ben Johnson matters most. Not to unlock some highlight package. Caleb already owns the key. But to lower the number of snaps where he needs to use it. And the narratives right now that are saying things like the marriage doesn't work. But fixes aren't romantic, which is why they work. You install answers instead of daring someone to be special. If the nickel creeps and the safety rotates late, the ball replaces the blitzer by rule. You teach a footwork calendar he can feel. 1 hitch means progression 1. And 2 hitch means you're either on time to 3 or you're hot to the outlet by 2.8. Not trying to invent a new play at 3.3 seconds with your shoulders square to the left as a free runner arrives on your right. You cheat with formation and motion so you don't have to be a genius after the snap. You identify what defense it is, declare man or zone, you make the defense light in the box, or you throw a glance into their board of being wrong. You tag chips and delays so your back doesn't have to pick up the full man. He can tap the rush and leak into space where he becomes the fastest completion on the field. That's when the magic earns its keep, because you still want the artist, especially in January, especially on 3rd and impossible, especially when you have the wrong play and getting to the right one is a luxury you don't have. You still want the arm slot that turns a batted ball into a 19-yard rope. You still want the out-of-structure escape that makes a defense end miss twice and buys a second window crosser. You still want the huddle to believe that if the plan breaks, he can build a new one on the fly. You just don't want to live there. You want a mortgage, not a hotel. Week 1 felt like a tour through all of it. The opener had the exact rhythm coach's script on Tuesdays and quarterbacks dream about on Saturdays. The first 10 throws hit a drumline tempo, catch, set, throw. And the first drive ended with the quarterback in the end zone and the defense blinking. He added a passing touchdown after the half. And if you muted the fourth quarter, you'd walk away saying the offense looked, finally, like an offense. Minnesota cared very little for that narrative, obviously. The Vikings adjusted, spun a couple of lies after the snap, and stole Chicago's timing just enough to yank the game out of their hands. Even in the loss, you could point to the bones. No giveaways. Smart use of his legs, sacks kept to a minimum, and a quarterback who mostly made the right throw to the right player on the right timestamp. It's hard to teach a fan base patience when the quarterback isn't behaving, but the film gave you cover. This is how young quarterbacks learn to speak aloud in a defense language. This is what it looks like when the sentence structure is still choppy, but the vocabulary is growing. Week 2 didn't punish those signs so much as drown them out with volume. The Lions played like they had a message to deliver and used the Bears to write it. Detroit opened the game fast, kept the gas down, and every time Chicago reached for control, it wasn't there. The final score said rout. The split said there was still meat on the bone. Caleb was more efficient, and the 2 touchdowns were kind of grown up. Red zone throws you want on tape, but the 4 sacks remind you that good decisions can die if the protection is a half beat late or a route is 1 step too slow. When you strip the emotion out of the blowout, you can still ask technical questions without turning them into moral ones. Did the hot answers appear when Detroit showed pressure? Did the time to throw turn into a blitz window drop? Did the offense give the quarterback a quick game spine to lean on when the pass rush went from loud to rude? Those are fixable issues. They require repetition, humility, not a trade or a rank. You can find the boring completions faster, and suddenly, third down is a puzzle instead of a punishment. But meanwhile, the league is doing what it always does, framing a story like a trial and submitting Empire State Building punting stats as evidence. You've seen the headlines, you've heard the groans. That's how September sounds when your team is 0-2 and the second Sunday ended the way it did. Now, you can let that define you if you want. Or you can acknowledge the scoreboard, pull up the tape, and remember that player development is usually less like a rocket and more like a staircase. The next step for Caleb isn't a viral throw. It's a graph with 3 lines nudging in the right direction. Lower time to throw against blitz, higher immediate touches for backs and tight ends when defenses send 5 and 6, and a sack to pressure rate that looks boring by Thanksgiving. Make those changes and the conversation changes. But if you keep chasing highlights on downs that demand hygiene, and the league will give you another stack of 3rd and 30s and another week to talk about your punter. It's not glamorous. It is football. Now, there is a counter case worth saying out loud because it's true and it matters. The ceiling still pops off the tape. You're watching drift right, shoulder half open, and rip a 20-yard outbreaker that arrives before the corner finishes his plant. And you remember why scouts wrote silly metaphors during the draft cycle. You watch him step through and hit a fire seam on time, and you see a quarterback who can weaponize a tight end in a way Chicago hasn't done consistently in years. You watch him climb and stay square and hit receivers in stride on a glance route, and the receivers turn upfield like he owns miles. And you feel how easy yards can become when the rhythm lives in the huddle. That's why the roster mattered in March and April. That's why the installs matter in May and June. He has the rare stuff. But rare stuff is what you spin when boring stuff is covered. It cannot be your first read every play, every week, or every season. If the floor rises, if the boring choices arrive faster, the ceiling doesn't just look higher. It becomes accessible without a ladder. So what aren't they telling you about Caleb Williams? They're not telling you that the future of this experiment will be decided in the most unromantic rooms in the building. They're not telling you that his sophomore leap might look on paper like a modest bump in completion percentage paired with a glaring drop in sacks. And they're not going to tell you that this is what growth looks like for almost every young quarterback who has ever mattered. They're not telling you that his rookie interception discipline was historic. And if you pair that trait with a faster answer key against pressure, you suddenly have the skeleton of a playoff offense long before the fireworks catch up. They're not telling you that the head coach who just left Detroit built a system that manufactured answers for an entirely different kind of quarterback, and that he didn't take the job in Chicago to prove he can call deep posts on 3rd and a mile. He took it to build a rhythm section that lets your lead guitarist set the hook on the chorus instead of noodling over a drum solo. Short term, the schedule is going to ask for your patience and offer almost no rewards for giving it. The national noise will over-index to wins and losses because it can't help itself. And meanwhile, the staff will grade the 3 dials nobody tweets about. Medium term, if sacks normalize and hot answers show up. A 4,000-yard season slides back into view without a historic leap. If they don't, the freelance label sticks, and suddenly your improvisation becomes a flaw instead of a flourish. Long term, the best Chicago made wasn't really on a right arm. It was on a brain speed curve. It was on the idea that a quarterback with touch and torque gifts can learn to play on beat when the music demands it. 2 weeks into year 2, the film says both things at once. You can see a plan. You can also see places where the plan frays and the defense finds daylight. You can clip sequences from the Vikings game and sell them as progress. You can clip sequences from the Lions game and sell them as doom. Neither is honest in isolation. Put them together and they read like a quarterback who's learning to be boring faster and still figuring out how to be special less. That's not a criticism. That's a compliment disguised as a chore list. The NFL doesn't test how far you can throw as often as it tests how quickly you can see. That's the exam in front of Caleb Williams right now. In the quiet between the headlines and hot takes, It's not dramatic, so people forget to mention it. But if he passes it, the dramatic stuff tends to take care of itself. And that's the part of the story we often miss when we try to script the future by Monday night. Chapter 1 wasn't a bust, it was a syllabus. The 354 interception free throws weren't a glitch, they were a glimpse of restraint. The 68 sacks were a lesson written in bruises, not a prophecy. Week 1 this year looked like a rehearsal where the lines were finally memorized until the closing scene flipped the furniture. Week 2 looked like a visit from a neighbor who brought the fireworks to blow up your lawn. Both happen in the NFL. Both teach. But what matters is the revision. What matters is that the next time the nickel creeps, the ball is already on its way to a tight end in the flat before the broadcast finds the blitz. What matters is 2nd and 6 on a loop. What matters is that by Halloween, the sacks we remember are the ones he couldn't avoid because a man got beat, not the ones he invited by asking the defense to give him one more hitch. From DC to Chicago, from a freshman spark to a Heisman rookie who protected the ball while absorbing too much heat, Caleb Williams has already written more chapters than most quarterbacks do by age 23. The next act won't be written right away. It'll be written in the timing of a 3-step throw when the slot corner lies with his eyes. It'll be written in an audible nobody hears. It'll be written in a box score that looks almost boring and a scoreboard that looks like relief. It'll be written in games that feel smaller because the problems did. We love to pretend quarterbacks grow up in a single afternoon, but they don't. They grow up in 1,000 little choices. If Caleb keeps choosing faster answers in the moments that used to seduce him into hero ball, the rest of the story starts to write itself in a negative way. The Bears don't need a magician every snap. They need a surgeon most of the time, and a magician when things go south. That's what Ben Johnson is building. That's what year 2 is already hinting at in flashes. And that quietly, stubbornly behind the scenes about punts and blowouts and panic is what they aren't telling you about Caleb Williams. But did you know most quarterbacks follow a particular pattern? They ascend, then they peak, and then they decline. But Tua Tagovailoa's trajectory has been anything but normal. From day 1, he soared too early, fell too far, rebounded too quickly, and now floats somewhere in between greatness and uncertainty. His career is a collection of contradictions. He's fragile yet fearless, overpaid yet underappreciated, a system quarterback yet essential to the system. At every turn, just when we think we got him figured out, something changes. Another twist, another spark, another collapse. So what's next? If you want to know what they aren't telling you about Tua Tagovailoa, just click right here.